Okay, so get this. Everyone's still reeling from this election, and we are diving right into the deep end to try to figure out what just happened
Yeah.
with this 2024 election. All those polls we were glued to.
Right.
Yeah. Turns out those were about as useful as a screen door on a submarine because Trump is back in the White House.
Yeah.
And another big winner here, Elon Musk. Yeah, his gamble on Trump, it paid off big time. At least that's what this Forbes Daily article is saying. Settled. Elon Musk gets richer as his risky bet on Trump pays off. So we're going to unpack all of this, how this unexpected victory is shaking things up for everyone, not just Musk, but for Tesla too, and maybe even the entire U.S. economy.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack.
So first things first, how did Trump manage to pull this off? I mean, the polls had him trailing for months.
It was a truly surprising win, especially when you look at the pre-election polls. It seemed like nobody saw this coming. Nobody predicted such a decisive win for Trump.
Right, and it wasn't just some tiny margin of victory. He won big. And he actually gained ground in areas where he struggled before,
Yeah.
like with black voters and young people.
And don't forget about the Latino vote.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't that supposed to be a slam dunk for Biden and Harris? I mean, back in 2020, Biden had this huge lead with Latino voters. What happened there?
Well, it looks like that advantage evaporated this time around. The article points out that Vice President Harris only managed to hold a 6-point margin with Latino voters.
6 points.
Yeah.
Wow. Compared to Biden's 33-point lead in 2020, that's a huge drop.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the Latino vote that shifted. Trump actually flipped some major cities that usually lean Democrat.
Seriously?
Yeah, and here's the kicker. Democrat votes in those same areas actually went down.
Okay, so something major clearly shifted in this election.
Mhm.
What do you think happened? Was it Trump's messaging that resonated with voters this time, or were there deeper economic factors at play?
It's tough to say for sure. It's probably a combination of factors. But one theory is that Trump's message really connected with urban voters who felt like the Democrats weren't listening to their concerns.
So maybe they were worried about things like crime or the cost of living, and they felt like Trump was the only one addressing those issues.
That's a possibility, for sure.
Okay, so Trump surprised everyone with this win. But let's talk about Elon Musk for a second. The guy who basically bet the farm on Trump.
Right.
Even when everyone thought it was a terrible move for his business.
Yeah.
And what happened? Tesla stock skyrocketed after the election results came in.
Yeah, it went up 15%.
15%.
Which added a cool $21 billion to Musk's net worth.
Talk about a gamble that paid off big time.
It really is remarkable, especially when you consider that earlier this year, a Wedbush securities analyst named Dan Ives predicted that a second Trump presidency would actually be negative for the EV industry overall.
Wait a minute. How does that work? If it's bad for the industry overall, wouldn't it also be bad for Tesla?
Well, Ives made a distinction. He said that while he thought a second Trump term would be negative for the overall EV market, he also said it would be a huge positive, specifically for Tesla.
Okay, interesting. So what makes Tesla so special? Why would they do well even if the rest of the industry struggles?
Ives thinks it comes down to Tesla's size and scope. They're just so far ahead of the competition in terms of production and infrastructure. He believes this gives Tesla a big advantage, even if government policies become less favorable towards electric vehicles.
So even if the government isn't pushing for EVs as hard as they were before, Tesla's already established dominance is enough to keep them on top.
Yeah, that's the idea. But it does raise some questions. Like, what factors might make a second Trump term less favorable for the EV industry? And how might Tesla use its position to thrive in that environment?
All good questions. And then, of course, there's the big question of what role Musk himself might play in the new administration. Trump called him a super genius during his victory speech, remember?
Hard to forget that one.
And Musk even threw out the idea of leading a whole new Department of Government Efficiency focused on cutting federal spending. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly an ambitious proposal. But we have to keep in mind that Musk already has his hands full with Tesla and SpaceX. It's hard to imagine him taking on a major government role on top of all that.
You're telling me the guy's already running two of the most innovative companies on the planet.
Exactly. So it's unlikely we'll see him in some official cabinet position.
But still,
Yeah.
just the fact that it's even being discussed is pretty amazing. It really shows how much influence Musk has.
Right.
And it's not just in the tech world anymore. It seems like his influence could extend to government policy and spending decisions.
Absolutely. And that's something to keep a close eye on, because with Musk openly supporting Trump, there's a real chance he could get some preferential treatment.
You mean like less scrutiny on his businesses?
Exactly. Which could give Tesla even more of an advantage, especially if the Trump administration takes a more hands-off approach to regulation.
Less red tape. Sounds like a dream for a company like Tesla. They could move even faster and expand even more aggressively.
Potentially, but we also have to consider the impact on the rest of us.
Right. The non-billionaires.
Exactly. Remember, Trump talked a lot about tariffs during his campaign. Those could have a huge impact on the economy, and especially on everyday consumers.
So everything could get more expensive.
That's the concern. The article specifically mentions that tariffs could lead to higher prices on all sorts of things. We're talking about electronics, clothes, even groceries.
Ouch. That's definitely going to hit people's wallets.
Yeah, and economists have been warning about this for a while. They're concerned that these tariffs will end up hurting consumers the most.
So it's a mixed bag, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will benefit from Trump's policies, but others will definitely feel the pinch.
It's almost always that way.
True. Okay, so we've talked about the election results and the potential impact on Musk and Tesla, but what about the rest of the billionaire crowd? How are they reacting to Trump's return?
It's interesting. The article points out a pretty clear divide. Conservative billionaires are celebrating on X, what used to be Twitter.
Right.
But liberal billionaires, they've been pretty quiet.
So it's like two different camps. The pro-Trump side is throwing a party, and the other side is licking their wounds.
You could say that.
It really highlights this growing influence billionaires have in politics. We're talking about people with immense wealth and power who can shape public opinion and sway policy.
Yeah. And now with a billionaire back in the White House, that dynamic becomes even more intriguing and potentially more concerning.
Right. It makes you wonder how this new power dynamic will affect policy decisions and how it will impact economic inequality in the coming years.
That's definitely something we'll need to keep a close eye on. But I think we'll save that for later in our deep dive.
Agreed. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive into some of the key issues facing Trump in his second term. And we'll explore what this all means for the future of America. So we've got Trump back in the White House and Elon Musk sitting pretty after his big bet paid off. But what does this actually mean for the future? Like, where do we even begin to unpack all this?
Well, I think it's safe to say we're in uncharted territory here. This election has thrown a lot of curveballs, and it feels like everything's up in the air. Technology, the economy, politics. It's hard to predict what's coming next.
And right smack in the middle of all this is Elon Musk. You gotta admit, he's a pretty fascinating character. Like, on one hand, he represents this incredible potential of technology and innovation. But on the other hand, his support for Trump raises all sorts of questions about the role of wealth and power in America.
Yeah, he's definitely a complex figure. And his relationship with Trump is, well, it's unprecedented.
The Forbes article we're looking at, it even points out how closely tied Tesla's stock is to Musk's image and his relationship with the government. If he's seen as a key player in the Trump administration, it could actually boost investor confidence and send Tesla's stock soaring even higher.
That's certainly a possibility, but there's always the flip side. What if Trump's policies don't work out the way people expect? Or what if Musk gets caught up in some kind of political controversy? That could seriously damage Tesla's brand, and it could turn off a lot of potential customers.
Yeah, he's definitely taking a big risk. And it's not just Tesla we're talking about either. Think about SpaceX and Neuralink. The political climate could have a huge impact on those companies too.
Absolutely. Let's take SpaceX, for example. If Trump decides to make space exploration a top priority, SpaceX could be in for a massive windfall.
Oh, yeah. Think about all the government contracts and funding they could get.
Exactly. But if the administration focuses on other things, like rebuilding American manufacturing or investing in infrastructure, SpaceX might have a harder time competing for resources and attention.
So it's kind of a make-or-break situation for Musk and his companies.
In a lot of ways, yes. But I think this election has also exposed some deeper rifts in American society, things that go beyond just politics or economics.
Like what?
Well, we're seeing a growing gap between the super rich and everyone else, and there's this resurgence of nationalism and populism, and a lot of people just don't trust institutions or experts anymore.
That's definitely true. And it feels like those trends are only getting stronger.
And it's not just happening in America. We're seeing similar things all over the world. It's like this global wave of discontent fueled by economic inequality, rapid technological change, and the breakdown of traditional power structures.
It's almost like the whole world is having an identity crisis.
In a way, I think you're right.
So where do we go from here? It's easy to get overwhelmed by all this big picture stuff.
It is. It's a lot to process. But maybe we should zoom in on a little more concrete, something that affects us all personally, like our health.
Good point. So let's talk about Trump's potential pick for a key health role, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Ah, yes. The vaccine skeptic. That appointment has a lot of people worried, especially in the medical and scientific communities.
Yeah, his views on vaccines and other public health issues have been pretty controversial, to say the least.
A lot of experts consider his ideas, well, unscientific and potentially dangerous.
Especially when it comes to vaccines.
Mm.
We've already seen how much damage misinformation can do. It spreads so quickly online, and it can lead to people choosing not to vaccinate, which puts entire communities at risk.
It's a reminder that we all need to be critical thinkers, especially when it comes to the information we see online.
We can't just believe everything we read. We have to do our own research and make sure we're getting information from reliable sources.
Absolutely. Our health depends on it.
Okay, so we've got this looming public health crisis. And on top of that, we're still dealing with the elephant in the room, climate change.
It's easy to forget about the bigger picture when you're caught up in all the political drama. But climate change is not going away, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, 2024 is on track to be the hottest year on record. We're already past that critical 1.5 degrees Celsius warming threshold set by the Paris Agreement.
And those aren't just numbers. We're seeing the real-world effects of climate change every day. More extreme weather, rising sea levels, disruptions to agriculture. It's all happening right now.
And it's scary to think that Trump might pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. That would be a huge step backward in the fight against climate change.
It would definitely set us back. But it's important to remember that governments aren't the only ones responsible for tackling climate change. We all have a role to play.
So what can we do as individuals?
We can make changes in our own lives. We can demand action from our leaders, and we can support organizations that are working to create a more sustainable future. Every little bit helps.
It's a reminder that even small actions can make a difference, especially when we all work together.
Exactly. Collective action is powerful.
Okay, so we've talked about technology, the economy, public health, climate change. But there's one more thing we need to address, and it's a big one. The potential erosion of democratic norms and the rule of law.
You're talking about those reports that Trump might use the FBI and the Justice Department to go after his political enemies.
Yeah, it's a pretty disturbing thought, and it strikes at the heart of what it means to be a democracy. If a president can use law enforcement for personal gain or political revenge, it sets a dangerous precedent.
Absolutely. It undermines the whole idea of equal justice under the law, and it creates a climate of fear and intimidation. It makes people afraid to speak out or challenge those in power.
And we've seen this happen in other countries where leaders have consolidated their power by silencing dissent and persecuting their opponents.
It's a slippery slope. And we need to be very careful not to let it happen here. We have to defend our democratic principles and hold our leaders accountable.
We can't let the rule of law be trampled on just because it's politically convenient.
Exactly. We have to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult.
It's a sobering reminder that democracy is fragile, and we can't take our freedoms for granted. We have to be active participants in our democracy, speak out against injustice, and demand better from our leaders.
And that starts with being informed and engaged. We need to be critical thinkers. We need to be careful about the information we consume, and we need to participate in the political process.
We need to demand transparency and accountability from our leaders and hold them to the highest standards of conduct.
It's not always easy, but it's absolutely necessary. The stakes are too high. The future of our nation depends on it.
But even with all the challenges we're facing, there's still hope, right?
Of course. The fact that we're having this conversation right now is a sign of hope. We're thinking critically, we're grappling with complex issues, and we're seeking out different perspectives. That tells me that our democracy is still alive and well.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we have the power to shape our own destiny.
We do. We have the power to demand better from our leaders and to create a more just and equitable society.
So how do we do that? What are some concrete steps we can take to make a difference?
Well, for starters, we need to embrace innovation. We need to be willing to challenge the status quo, and we need to be open to new ideas.
And what about all the division and polarization we're seeing? How do we overcome that?
We need to foster collaboration and build bridges across divides. We need to listen to each other with empathy and understanding, and we need to remember that we're all in this together.
So it's not just about changing policies or systems, it's about changing our mindset too.
Exactly. We need to shift away from fear and towards hope and action. We need to believe that a better future is possible, and we need to be willing to work for it.
That's a powerful message. And it's a good reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things. We have to be active participants in creating the world we want to live in.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and it's been a thought-provoking journey. But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we take away from this conversation and how we move forward.
That's the beauty of it. We've provided the information, the analysis, the different perspectives. Now it's up to you to connect the dots, to draw your own conclusions, and to figure out what role you want to play in shaping the future.
The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through the choices we make, the actions we take, and the stories we tell.
So keep exploring these topics, keep challenging your assumptions, and keep engaging in thoughtful conversations with others. The world is constantly changing, and it's up to all of us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
And that's a wrap for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. Keep those minds churning, and we'll catch you next time. We've talked about a lot of heavy stuff in this deep dive. This crazy election, Musk's big gamble, the potential fallout for Tesla, for the climate, for democracy. But there's something else I want to bring up, something that's been kind of lurking beneath the surface of all this.
What's that?
Fear.
Yeah, fear. That's definitely been a big factor in all of this.
Feels like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
In the rhetoric of both candidates, in the anxieties of voters, even in the financial market.
Well, like this undercurrent running through everything.
And it's not just the obvious kind of fear, like fear of economic hardship or, fear of the other. There's something deeper going on, I think.
Oh, I agree.
It's like a fear of the unknown, a fear of rapid change, a fear of losing control.
You're hitting the nail on the head. The world is changing so fast right now. Technological advancements, globalization, demographic shifts. It's overwhelming.
And it's easy to feel like we're losing our grip on things.
Exactly. And when you add in political instability and a lack of trust in institutions, it's like the ground is shifting beneath our feet.
It's like we're all just trying to keep our balance.
And in those moments of uncertainty, fear takes hold. People start grasping for simple answers to complex problems.
Which is how you get a rise in populism, nationalism, authoritarianism. We've seen this pattern repeat itself over and over again throughout history.
And it seems like we're right in the middle of it again.
In social media, it's like pouring gasoline on the fire.
Oh, absolutely. Social media creates these echo chambers where fears and anxieties are amplified, and misinformation and conspiracy theories spread like wildfire.
It's tough to know what to believe anymore.
It really is. We need to be so careful about the information we consume, and we need to develop the critical thinking skills to navigate this complex information landscape.
We have to be more discerning, more skeptical, more willing to question what we see and hear.
And we have to be willing to engage in constructive dialogue, even with people who have different views than our own.
It's easy to get caught up in the outrage and the anger, but that doesn't really get us anywhere.
No, it doesn't. We need to be willing to listen to each other and try to understand where the other side is coming from.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. Fear is a powerful emotion. It's not always easy to just switch it off.
Of course not. Fear is a natural human response to uncertainty and threat. It's part of our survival instinct.
So how do we deal with it then, in a healthy way?
I think the key is to acknowledge our fears, to not try to suppress them or pretend they don't exist.
So face them head on.
Exactly. And then ask ourselves, what can we learn from these fears? What actions can we take to address the underlying concerns?
So instead of letting fear paralyze us, we can use it as a catalyst for positive change.
That's the idea. Fear can be a powerful motivator. It can drive us to innovate, to create, to build a better future.
So think about all the challenges we're facing right now. Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization. These are huge problems.
Yeah.
But there are also opportunities.
Opportunities to reimagine our world, to create a society that's more just, more sustainable, more equitable.
It's like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And we have a choice to make. We can give in to fear and let it divide us, or we can choose to come together and build something better.
It's not going to be easy, but it's possible.
So what can we do? What are some practical steps we can take to make a difference?
Well, first of all, we need to be open to new ideas. We need to be willing to challenge the status quo. And we need to embrace innovation.
And what about all the division and polarization? How do we bridge that gap?
We need to foster collaboration and build relationships with people who are different from us. We need to listen to each other with empathy and understanding.
And we need to remember that we're all in this together.
Right. Absolutely. We're all sharing this planet. We're all facing these challenges. And we all have a stake in creating a better future.
It's a good reminder that we're not as different as we sometimes think.
We all want the same basic things. We want to feel safe and secure. We want to provide for our families. And we want to live in a world that's just and fair.
Those are universal values.
Exactly. And I think if we can focus on those shared values, we can start to overcome the things that divide us.
So it's not just about changing policies or systems. It's about changing our hearts and minds.
That's what it all comes down to in the
It's
end.
a call to action for all of us to be
But
more compassionate, more understanding, more engaged.
we can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things. We have to be the change we want to see in the world.
Well said. I think that's the perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and it's been a wild ride.
It has.
But I hope it's given our listeners some food for thought and some inspiration to create a better future.
That's what we were hoping for.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, the future is not set in stone. It's up to all of us to decide what it will look like.
Keep those minds churning, and we'll catch you next time.
That's a wrap.